Thank you so much for doing this.
Oh man, it's not a problem. It's kind of fun. I told Scott, I said, yeah, I'm going to be famous. And and the first thing he said, it's Mark Cox's
Yeah,
podcast thing.
he's
And
gonna
I
be
was like,
famous too.
I, I said, I said, yeah, but I'm going to be more famous. Nobody wants to hear you.
So,
Yeah.
do you still keep up with? I'm just literally rolling into the conversation. We're recording. Let's just make it
Yeah.
happen. I'm here with Trey McClenahan. Do you still like chat with any of the students from way back in the day?
There's Scott Workman and Daniel Richards probably are the
Daniel
only
Richards.
two that Daniel is in my discipleship group here in town, and Scott is probably the only guy from high school that I talk to on at least a daily or weekly basis, bare
Yeah,
minimum. So
that's so. I did not know that y'all kept up. So
yeah,
that's incredible to me. I remember talking about high schoolers, like your close friends. I know that they're your ride or dies, but there's just something that happens in that next season where maybe
mhm.
you're not gonna like hang out with some of those high schoolers anymore. And every high schooler's like, you don't know me. Okay,
Yeah,
we're gonna be friends
that's exactly
forever.
the way it was. Yeah, yeah,
So, but that's cool. You and Scott and Daniel. I ran into Daniel at Orange Beach in 2015 on vacation, and we had donuts together. So I'm glad to hear he's doing well as well.
yeah.
What church are you guys going to, and where at?
Back in Indian Springs,
That's
I went.
awesome.
Yeah, I went to while I was in college. That was kind of one of the things I kind of graduated from church, and if it wasn't for having a dad or stepdad that is pastor, I probably wouldn't have gone to church hardly at
Wow.
all. And then because I kind of played it like my get out of jail free card, and kind of
Yeah.
moved on from like, I'll catch up with God later. I mean, like I can go and live my life the way I want to now, and then I'll come back around to it. And it wasn't really until I guess I graduated college, I was like, man, I got to get my life together. Like
Yeah.
I've wasted the last 4 years of probably the time where I had the most influence on other people
Mhm.
doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that was kind of it was honestly, it was whenever I got engaged to my wife. Uh, that was kind of like the kick in the butt. I was like, I got to grow up,
Yeah.
like at some point I got to stop acting like a kid and start acting like a man at some point. But yeah, that
Yeah.
was the catalyst. So
Okay. So I know you, but for those who don't know you, give us some context. What year did you graduate high school?
2013,
2013. And where did you end up at college?
Arkansas State University in
Arkansas
Jonesboro.
State, Jonesboro. Okay. And so you graduated. Did you graduate in 17?
Yep.
Okay. And so when did you meet your wife? How did you meet your wife?
uh, we worked together as RAs on campus, and then we the first night we really kind of hung out together was at a party in
Yeah.
college, and we hung out that first night, and then we spent the next 3 years hanging out just about every single day together.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's how it works.
yeah,
So,
pretty much.
so you going back to, you said that it was when you met her or when you got serious with her that you kind of wanted to get your act together, right?
Yeah,
What,
when
like,
we got engaged,
okay. Okay.
because I was back at home, and she was finishing her victory lap at ASU.
Mhm.
She had an extra semester due to some classes that she had to make. But
For
anyways,
sure.
so I was alone here, and I would go to church with Chris and my mom, and I kind of half out of I guess obligation, because I lived in their house, so it it was kind of like, probably ought to
Sure.
go to church every now and then. And so it was somebody in his church. It was Scott and Farrah Gray, who are they're with Family Life. They asked if we wanted to do, or ever consider premarital counseling, and and that's whenever my wife would come home, we would visit churches, because we were looking at moving back here to Central Arkansas. And we ended up landing at Indian Springs, and we did premarital counseling with Scott and Farrah Gray from Chris's church. And that's kind of what kicked it all into gear. All those things kind of happening at the same time kind of kicked all that into gear, where I was like, I really need to figure this stuff out before I get married and I have more responsibilities than just myself.
That's incredible. I'm a big proponent of premarital counseling, and maybe for that reason alone, just get you started on the right foot. That's awesome. Okay. And so, I mean, you're going to Pleasant Grove, right? Pleasant Grove in Little Rock.
Yeah, that's where I was going at the time. And whenever she had started to move back in December, we were splitting time in between there and Indian Springs.
Gotcha. So Chris is preaching. He's looking at you. He's like, and folks, you need to get your act together. Is he maybe just a little preaching at you?
Who knows, man? I did a really good job, I think, of hiding it. Maybe not. Maybe I didn't, and I just think I am. But I feel like some of it, really a lot of it, I think, was just conviction in that, if he would say something from the pulpit about, oh, look at Trey, or make an example out of me, I'm like, I don't know that you really want to be using me, man.
So proud of my boy. No,
don't be. You don't know what I did yesterday.
Oh no, man! Why did we not get Chris on the podcast? That would have been a great addition to this whole thing.
It would have been a terrible time to figure out that there's another page to this Zoom where he's just listening behind me.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great.
Stuff would come out.
Man. Okay. Well, listen, thanks for catching us up. You graduated high school in 2013. You and your class of students were like the ones that pretty much tracked with me. So I was in Indian Springs, doing student ministry from 2007 to 2014. So y'all were pretty much there with me almost the whole way. We left in 2014 to go plant in Columbus, and still try to keep up with folks as best as we can. But you have taken this survey that I've asked several students to take. And so I've got your responses here. And if it's all right, I just kind of want to like pepper through some of them. Sure. You said you mostly enjoyed your youth ministry experience, that you felt loved, cared for. You said you found community, you made friends, you had pastors pouring into you. You felt not just a part of the youth ministry, but you felt a part of the whole church. And then I'm looking here, you said, you definitely, you learned it like there was a sense in which having a relationship with Christ was important. But I also see, like, man, I don't know exactly that we were taught exactly or led or guided how to have a relationship with Christ. And so there was a lot of just kind of read your Bible, kind of maybe like, hey man, just read your Bible, it'll help. It'll be your guide, your, whatever. But that you probably had to kind of muddle through some of that, probably a little bit on your own, through like, can you talk more about that? Just what was it like? You're there as a student, and that there's this like, man, we want you to have a relationship with Christ. And there's all these things like go to church and serve and give and help and go on mission trips. And, and there's a certain element where you're like, I got some missing pieces here. Can you say more about that?
So I think, especially because, I got saved whenever I was 15, whenever I truly understood what it meant to, to I guess, what the free gift of Christ is. So, I mean, that's probably what I would say because that's whenever I got saved, got baptized. And so at that point, as much as I can remember, like you were told, okay, well, now you're saved. And, here's kind of what, a life after salvation looks like, that like, there's supposed to be some transformation. There's supposed to be changing of your heart, and you're supposed to have this personal relationship with Christ.
Yeah.
All right. Here you go, start reading the Bible. Well, I start reading the Bible, trying to, the commitment level of a 15-year-old guy, especially, is extremely low.
Mm-hmm.
So the quality of a daily reading that I'm getting probably pretty low as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was a contributing factor. But at the same token, I don't think that what that personal relationship was really supposed to look like. Yeah, you're supposed to read the Bible, but you're supposed to be digging in deep and saying, turn around and looking at yourself and saying, okay, how does that measure up to what God wants me to do? Not just, well, that's great that God said that, or, that Jesus said that, or whatever. It's about, how do I apply that to what I'm going through in my life right now?
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't the piece that you really put together at probably 15, especially on your own.
For sure.
Is, what does it look like in real life to practice these things? It wasn't, I don't know that, we put a huge emphasis either on, like, Matthew 28:14, it's talking about going out and creating disciples. Yeah, we wanted to talk to our friends about it, or whatever, or get them to come to church, but
Mm-hmm.
were we truly being convicted in our heart of, these are souls, and these, I mean, they are destined for an eternity spent away from God, and what that truly looks like. I mean, I'm sure we talked about it at some point. I'm not saying that it wasn't ever spoken about, but it wasn't something that was really driven home that, hey, you're like the call to action.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't stop at your salvation. You are called to by Christ to go forth and make disciples, and to tell people of what you've learned. And so I think those are the biggest areas probably where I never really got it until, as an adult, I came back and really got invested in church.
That's amazing. It's really insightful. I think that on some levels, like, you're exactly right. There's things that a teenager can grasp onto. And I'm sure there's plenty of things talked about over the course of a school year, or even a middle school and high school career, like your whole youth ministry,
Right.
career and experience. What were some of the ways that you feel like you did connect? What were some things that you remember learning in those years that you did walk away with? Like, maybe like
So,
pillars of your faith, I guess.
I mean, I definitely understood the importance, I guess, of, hey, I'm supposed to read my Bible. That's supposed to be a part of my relationship with Christ. Hey, I'm supposed to spend time in prayer and in a quiet time with Christ, but I didn't know what that really
Sure.
actually looked like.
Yeah.
Granted, yeah, it's time spent with the Lord, but how do you use that? I think that was the really the missing piece. But I think I understood definitely the importance of those things, but I didn't really apply them.
Yeah.
The way that they needed to be applied.
Do you think that it's, you tell a kid, like, it's read your Bible. I mean, is that the same thing as saying you need to eat your vegetables? Like, I know you don't want to, but you need to. And it's just kind of like a black and
So
white.
it's funny because it comes full circle. I felt, probably some of the few reasons why I didn't end up just completely graduating out of church was my time in youth group, and then my time as, obviously a pastor's son,
Mhm.
and having it just drilled into me every week.
Yeah.
Just going back to the full circle thing, I have two 15-year-old boys, sometimes three 15-year-old boys that I have a discipleship group with every Wednesday after
Oh,
church.
wow, that's awesome.
And so one of the things is reading on a weekly basis and kind of instilling that into them. And I, from watching them, it is exactly like eating your vegetables. Like, trying to get them to get that, hey, it's not just reading. Like, it's taking something out of what you've read.
Yeah.
It's the nutrients that you're getting from it. It's not the food. I don't care that you're eating the food. I need you to get something out of it. I need you to digest it. I need you to get something out of it, or you might as well just not do it. I mean, it's not a checklist item. I mean, if you want it to be a checklist item, go ahead, but that's not helping you get anywhere.
That's amazing.
And so it's it's funny because it's basically like looking back into the mirror. 12 years. As depressing as that is.
Yep.
And so I don't know, like that's a really good question, because I'm not, what is it past that? How do you get to that point? How do you really, convey that, especially to a 15-year-old, as even somebody that's lived that,
There's a part of me that wonders if part of the strategy is, and that's kind of what I'm not going at this like hoping to find this answer or that answer. I'm going
yeah,
into this looking objectively, like for what works, what doesn't work. And I'm wondering if some of the strategy is literally they won't get it. You're just going to have to walk with them. And maybe if you drive in, here's some disciplines, and they're
yeah,
not going to get it the first 1,700 times, but they might get
yeah,
it on 1,701.
yeah,
If they have this, because I hear over and over what you're saying, like reading the Bible is a value, but
hmm,
of course, it's eating your vegetables,
yeah,
and so you being able to see it from both sides is amazing. Remembering what it was like as a teenager, and also you've got
hmm.
these 3 15-year-old guys. How long, I'm just so curious, how long have you been serving in the student ministry that way?
Um, I've been in the student ministries for about a year and a half, and we started these discipleship groups at the first of this year. So about 11 months.
That's great.
We've been doing these. So, and it's been something that I think has been really good for these guys, because, they've moved from, somewhat mature in their faith to at least making it a point, because, it especially a while over the summer, like I felt like it got stagnant.
Mm.
Football became a priority, sports became a priority, and I get it. I mean, it's part of being 15 and whatnot. But we had like a weekend lock-in deal for is like men's retreat. It's, all of our youth group guys, and I had one of the boys approach me about accountability, and I was like, I'll gladly, teach you what that looks like, and show you. And then the other one also wanted to do it as well. I was like, man, that's a huge growth point. Like, that's one, it's them taking the initiative on,
Yeah.
their relationship, but two, it's also taking a bigger step into it. It's a much deeper one. And I told them, I said, man, y'all are gonna have to be 100% honest. Like, you don't get anywhere telling the half truth. Like, you might as well just not even do it. Again, it's one of those deals. Might as well not do it, because if you're not going to be 100% honest in it, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
So it was great to see that, you know, or encouraging to see that, and we've slowly started that. That's only been about 2 or 3 weeks doing that. So I think this Wednesday's our third week. So
Man.
see how it goes.
Let me ask you a question then. I'm like way off script. I don't really have a script, let's be honest. Um,
Sounds more like the Mark I know.
here's my question. So small groups were a big part of our student ministry. We did those on Sunday
Mhm.
mornings. We did kind of the big service, or we did cell groups on Wednesday nights, depending on the season.
Yeah.
What what did your time in small groups teach you about what you're doing with these 15-year-old guys? Because it was a bigger group. I mean, what you're doing is a lot more specific. It's a lot more special. You just got 3 15-year-old guys. I mean, there may have been times there was 3 15-year-old guys in your small group, but you had a pretty good sized small group.
Yeah.
It was a good chunk of guys in there. They were all kind of going for it at the same time. But what is that maybe shedding some light on, small group leading?
Um,
And honestly, it's so new, you may not even have like, I don't know. We're 3 weeks in.
yeah. I mean, I don't. I've honestly never really looked back into that, outside of, who was I whenever I was 15. And man, and that's another thing. Like, kids today are just so different. Like just the way they interact with each other and stuff
Yes.
like that, totally different
Yeah.
than what, kids are today. Um, but I guess to get into your question, man, the thing that I probably take the most from my time in small groups and putting it into these guys is probably um, from when we did cell groups, like just when we were, because Scott and I led one kind of together. He did
Mhm.
90% of it, and I just kind of tagged along. But
Don't short sell
mm,
yourself.
I promise you, uh, I promise you, there was every single Wednesday me looking at the material for the first time at about 4:30 when people are showing up at your house at 5:15.
This
So
is another one of those, Chris. If you knew, you might not use him as an example. Got it. All right.
yeah,
Got it.
there you go. Yeah, that's the minimal of his worries for for my examples. But no, I mean it was those times when guys asked the the hardest, the deepest questions was only whenever they were in a small group and they felt like they could. There were some of those deeper questions that came out like there was at least one, probably two guys that would have described themselves as either agnostic or questioning the existence of God, let
Yeah.
alone, is Jesus Christ the one and true Savior? Um, and so we got into some deeper theological talk than probably most 15-year-olds in that time. But it also showed that, you know, if you can narrow down the group a little bit and get them comfortable, because it's the same people every week.
Mhm.
If you get them comfortable, they'll open up. And that's kind of the biggest thing with those small groups is that, they'll get vulnerable with each other if they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of those guys that probably wouldn't ever darken the doors of a church did that because they were in a group that they knew that no matter what, probably nothing was going to happen outside of that. It wasn't going anywhere past those doors.
Yeah. So you're
So
talking when you're saying that, you're talking about the cell group experience, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So
yeah. When
man, I have an indelible memory of there was one particular cell group where I was at y'all's house.
mhm,
I believe it was yours, and it was there was an agnostic kid there. And hold on one second. I'm literally gonna show you something. Does this look familiar? And this is Jonathan and Scott. I
yep,
don't know if you can see.
yeah,
Okay, so this night, no, this wasn't the night, but I keep this on my wall to like remember that night specifically
yeah,
because that night all the hard questions were asked. And I was only there just because, well, first of all, I think that he was like, "Hey, I'm curious to meet the youth pastor or whatever." But like for the most part, I was
mhm,
just visiting cell groups, and you guys did an incredible job and gave him space to share.
yeah,
Um, but there was something about that trust that all of y'all had with each other that y'all were able to share, and it was one of the only times. Be careful how I say this. It's one of the only times that I've seen someone really like trust so much that we weren't just out for gotcha moments, or we weren't just out there like, today's political fights where it's
exactly.
just like, you
Yeah,
know,
it's just looking for that chance to pounce.
yeah,
Oh,
like
caught you. You know,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And I never felt that with that cell group. And it's exactly right. I think with you, and I might even just encourage you, like continue um making that space for those guys that you're doing discipleship with, because honestly, here's what I've learned. Safe place for students to ask hard questions is
yeah,
vital in the life of a student who is um developing in their faith and their spiritual journey. And there's almost nowhere where they feel like, and the truth, they don't wake up and be like, you know what, I want to have a conversation about Calvinism today and see if I'm like real, or whatever. Like they're just not like, they're not going there until they get there. And then usually those questions like get squashed because we've got a program that we got to get done.
Right.
And so, man, that open space and that trust. So exactly what you said, the honesty is like the vehicle for like further trust and like hard questions and dialogue and all that stuff. So that's good. I think you're going to be, I almost need like a follow-up conversation with you, to see like, okay, a year has gone by, how are these guys doing? And then maybe even like 3 years, they're 18 and they're talking about what mattered in this season. I'd be very curious. So we'll do a follow-up episode at some point. That's amazing. Do you have, okay, when you think about, this is kind of a wild out there question. When you think about your years in student ministry, 6th through 12th grade, what are some of the images and memories that pop up just kind of like popcorn? They can be the fun ones. They can be the good or the bad or the ugly, right?
Man, the one that always comes to mind is that night that I put Ryan, oh my gosh, what's his last name? Williams, in that tight car and pulled him down that hill. Dude, how he did not get,
what'd you pull him in, Trey?
Named a kid's tight car behind my truck.
Behind your truck. How fast were you going, Trey?
At least 45 miles an hour.
I believe it was 55.
I think so. At the height of the excitement, I believe it was somewhere around there. But man, I've still got that video, and every time I see it, man, it blows my mind.
For legal reasons, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, let me tell you, I don't know how I wasn't jailed on manslaughter, because that was the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life, and it happened within 30 minutes of leading a cell group. Like that tells you right there the epitome of a 16 to 17-year-old kid that thinks he has it together, that has no clue.
I remember that Wednesday night, I believe I was sitting on my couch in my living room and I got a text, maybe like a group text with both of y'all on it. And it included that video, and my jaw was on the floor. And Chrissy's like, what? And I'm like, I had no words to describe.
Oh man. And, I can't oh yeah. I couldn't even imagine like being involved in the youth group. If I got that video today, and that happened like 30 minutes after church, and like I can't even imagine what my thought process would be now. Like I think of it from y'all's perspective now. I'm like, those morons, man.
I remember I had to get after you guys pretty good because it was like, here's the deal. I get why you did it. It is not okay. And it can literally never happen again. They're like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I just remember the fear of God being put into you guys.
Oh man, you definitely. I mean, I was pretty dumb and crazy, and so I know I got after Scott, I think, a lot more than it did me. But we
all were though. We all were. We were all dumb. Okay. What? So that's the number one. I remember you. I asked you to do this. I got an idea from another youth pastor where essentially I was like, the announcements are boring. We're gonna do announcements videos in a different way. And I had you shoot me with a paintball gun while I read the announcements off. You were yay big.
Yeah.
And
maybe 4.5 feet tall at the highest.
maybe. And I remember I told you, I said, now Trey, when I get done, I just want you to light me up and it'll be great for video. And like after the first paintball, I was like, oh, this sucks. This super sucks. And then I think you lit me up with about 4 or 5, like it was like 4 or 5 announcements. Yeah. And then at the very end, I'm like, no, I'm done.
Like you begged, and it took everything in me not to just let you have it, just because of what you said. You're like, just let me have it. And you know, when obviously we're not going to rehearse that kind of pain.
No.
And then you start begging that, and the sixth grader in me said no. Now, if that would have been 11th grade Trey, oh, it would have been the whole hopper, man.
A little,
It,
a
would have been
more,
all
a
of it.
little more courage.
Yep,
A little
that's
more
all it
like,
would have taken.
you'll be all right. Okay, so I remember my first Trey memory was World Changers 2008. World Changers 2008. You and your crew showed up. We went to Vero Beach, Florida. And
Yep.
are you tracking with me? This is a
Yeah.
long time ago for you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you and your crew showed up, and I remember vividly, like Christy and I were even talking about it. I was like, this crew has got some life in them. They're like fun. And I said, Christy, there's a lot of stuff going on. We were staying in this library in this public school, I remember, and had all the OG leaders, you know,
Yeah.
it was Bubba and it was Jimmy and it was just everybody was there. Josh was still there. And Hunter, I think that was his internship year.
Yep.
And you guys came in roaring, like just like this is
yeah.
a new class. And I remember y'all being fun. And then I remember in the latter years, y'all had grown all the way up and stepped into leadership. And so it was, yeah, like the cell group thing was not like it was not just a youth ministry program. It was a big deal. Do you remember any of like what it felt like to step into that?
So, man, I vividly remember whenever we helped lead, I guess that first year that we came back, because there are two things from that summer that I remember. Number one, I remember doing another announcement video where we waxed your back.
Yep.
That was also a part of, because that was Scott's intern year, and that was best part ever. But also leading that year, that was probably the last thing that I did where I probably felt really the Holy Spirit like leading me. Wow. Like during that week. That was the last time I did anything like that until I graduated college.
Wow.
Yeah, because I think that was in between our freshman and sophomore year. And you know, I was dating a girl at the time, and I'd gotten away from that because it just wasn't conducive. And then not you know, had that summer where Scott and I spent a lot of time together, did a lot of I guess you'd call it soul searching or whatever you want to call it, but and dug really deep. And then I went back to college that year, dating the same girl that I had been dating, and man, I wiped all that clean, and I did 180 from that, you know. And so yeah, that was why I vividly remember that, because that was probably the last real week where I felt like I was connected, you know, at all to Christ. So it was crazy how big of a 180, you know, just a little bit of time and complacency, you know, where that'll take you. But yeah, it is crazy to think about, you know, coming in 2007, 2008, and then where you leave the student ministry. I mean, there was a lot of growth and a lot of stuff that I built on, you know, whenever I came back to the church and really just kind of restarted. I guess there was a lot there that I could pick up on, you know, from leading cell groups, from those other things, and just, you know, because regardless of whether I was a major part of whatever deal I was in or not, that was still instilled the leadership qualities or the leadership material that I needed to take steps in the church that I'm doing now, you know, with the young guys or whatever it ends up being. Those are still some of the bigger things that probably fed into you know, the leadership stuff that I do now.
Yeah. Well, dude, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing. I mean, and just rehearsing some of these memories. I mean, it does my heart good to see you doing well, to lead in your own home, to be stepping into youth ministry leadership, discipling these 15-year-old guys. And so, dude, thank you for taking the time. It's crazy enlightening, 12 years later to talk about, all this stuff. So, dude,
Yeah,
just thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
not a problem, man. I'd love to do it. But yeah, we'll definitely do a catch up video with these kids. I guarantee you, 6 months from now, it looks just totally different
I'll guarantee you.
than where they're at today. So I mean, it'll be really cool to see where it goes. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, dude. I appreciate your time, and we'll catch
all
up
right,
with you soon.
all right, see you, dude.